Everybody is complaining about the prices of RTX 4090s. Even my dad's complaining about it, and he doesn't even know what a graphics card is. And today, I have a solution for each and every one of you on how you can obtain an RTX 4090. So we've got here at the channel two RTX 4090s that were sent in for review, and the first is the colorful igame Vulcan OC. And if you thought the Founders was big at 2.2 kilograms and massive triple slot cooler, this thing's even bigger. It takes up 3.5 slots, it's longer, and it weighs 2.5 kilos. So the graphics cards have gotten absolutely massive. But there is some good news there, and that is that they are going to impress, I think, people in terms of temperatures and noise. Though in today's video, we can't talk about any performance figures. I can just tell you that I'm testing on my test bench with an 850 watt power supply, and everything is okay. It is certainly not going to be a case of you press the power button and your whole house is burning down. Well, it might be if you're using a really terrible power supply like we've done in the past, but even then, that just smoked itself up. So let's go over everything RTX 4090 in today's video. And yes, the 4 in the RTX 4090 stands for 4 PCIe power cables.
Never pay full price for Windows 10 or 11 again. With today's video sponsor, SCD Keys, you can get activated for as little as $15 using that coupon BFTYC. Links in the description below.
Welcome back to Tech Yes City. And the first thing you will want to hear is, Brian, how can I save up for an RTX 4090? Well, I'm going to tell you guys a little story about how I saved up for my car, how I saved up for the gear that I used to record my YouTube videos back when I was saving as hard as I could. And it was a little friend called Baked Beans. That's right, Baked Beans. You were able to get these from the supermarket for 65 cents in Australia. So if we adjust that for the US exchange rate, we're getting 415 grams of baked beans in Australia for around 40 US cents. That's a bargain. So what this means is that effectively, instead of going out and spending $10 on that burrito or $15 on that burger lunch set, you can get a can of baked beans for 40 cents and then just pocket the difference. Do that for 180 days, my friends. You get yourself an RTX 4090. So there it is, the solution you have all been waiting for to how to get an RTX 4090. Just thank me in the comments section. Though one thing about baked beans is that they are very resistant to inflation, and that's because they already have a very cheap price to begin with. So say for instance, something that costs $1 goes up 25%, it's gone up 25 cents. But in absolute terms, people can still very much afford that, even with the bogus inflation numbers and even the bogus wage price increases that they've been touting in the news. Though let's take a look at the other side of the equation, and that is when graphics card prices go up 25%. That's a few $100s. That's a very difficult thing to stomach, especially if you're an avid PC gamer. Though going back to the RTX 4090, and we're going to pay particular attention to the 4090 in this video because I have expressed disappointment in the RTX 4080, especially the 12 gig model, which I thought was more of a 4070 when we look at the spec sheet. However, the 4090, it's coming in at $1599 over the $1499, and that's about 7% more expensive, but that's still even better than the inflation numbers. So technically, and I know people are going to get angry, but technically if we look at the numbers, you're getting a much better deal with a 4090 at $1599 than a 3090 at $1499. However, that being said, this time around, we don't have what looks like a 3080 $700 value card coming into the mix to really shake it up for those people who want high end but also want the value. Though it's time now to put on my serious pants and talk to you guys without any of the jokes or any of the baked bean inflation things, even though they are like legitimate ways to get yourself a nice things, is just eat baked beans. It's what I've done and I attest to it. But going forward, there is some serious concerns about the outlook of the economy, and it's absolutely horrendous. It's never been this bad in my whole life. I've never seen outlook being as bad as it is right now. Energy prices are going up. There looks like there's a shortage on energy. And wherever I look, people like to blame the person closest to them. Whoever's selling that product is the person to blame. So in this case, it'd be Nvidia's fault. If you want to buy a CPU, it's AMD's fault that their new motherboard costs are so expensive, the CPUs are so expensive. Intel will probably cop a lot of that too with Raptor Lake. But these are businesses trying to survive. They're trying to not just survive as well, of course, they're trying to thrive. And they're trying to thrive in a different set of conditions than they're used to. And this is where I've critiqued Nvidia, AMD, and Intel, where they're just simply going to have to take a haircut. They're going to have to make less money than they're used to, not just in terms of total revenue, but in terms of how much profit they get per item. And so wherever I go, if it's different videos I'm watching, even about unrelated stuff to tech, or if it's my own comment section, I'm seeing a lot of people just complaining in general. So as true inflation grows, that is when you go down to the supermarket and something goes up 20% in a couple of weeks, and then the government's telling you, hey, inflation only went up 5%, you're scratching your head saying, what is going on here? This is not reflecting how much prices are going up. And then you've also got unemployment, true unemployment on the rise. I believe it's actually on the rise. When you have those two things combined together, the misery index goes up. In other words, in an aggregate total in society, people become more miserable as inflation and unemployment go up. Though before we get back to the 4090s, I want people to understand, I'm going to actually start calling this out in my videos the more I can get a chance to. And that is, it's not AMD, Nvidia, or Intel's fault for these price rises in these conditions. In any other conditions, I would say yes, but when the money supply is getting inflated so fast and governments around the world are recklessly spending money, and then not just that, they're introducing new regulations and cutting off supply, that's the reasons inflation is going up and people are becoming more miserable. It's governments and central banks, people. So let's get to these 4090s and taking a look at what we can take a look at while the NDA is still in effect. So we got the founders here. This is a huge behemoth which comes in at a bigger fan than previous generation founders cards, one on the front, one on the back. And this does an extremely good job of cooling the GPU and keeping temperatures low as well as noise low. And then at the back of the card, you've got HDMI 2.1 out as well as your display port outs there. I would have liked to have seen two HDMI 2.1 outs from the get-go. And also we've got the 12 pin with a sensor adapter, which then requires 4 PCIe connectors from a traditional power supply in order to get this thing running. Now, in the testing here, I can say that nothing's melting down and nothing is really out of the ordinary there. And in fact, like I've said earlier in the video, I'm using an 850 watt power supply to do my testing with, and it's doing an absolutely fine job. So if you've got a really solid 850 watt power supply, then you should be okay. But in terms of the Founders Edition card, it is kicking ass in terms of its design, in terms of how it cools and everything else. At the back of the card, there's also a little bracket you can take out and screw into a graphics support slot just to keep the card from suffering from GPU sag. Though speaking of GPU sag, this is where we've got the colorful igame Vulcan OC with its 3 100mm fans and an even bigger dimension spec than the RTX 4090. In fact, this graphics card comes in with its own GPU support bracket in the box. You also get a screwdriver and 2 faceplates, one which can display information and another one which will just give you some fancy RGB and the logo. However, you can put the information plate on a separate USB readout separate from the graphics card. So I thought that was pretty cool. In terms of the back of the card, you've got, again, the 1 HDMI 2.1 and the 3 display port outs. I would have liked to have seen the 2 HDMI 2.1s. And then you've got a turbo button there, which is essentially a dual BIOS button. So you've got normal and then OC mode. So it's good to see dual BIOS on this RTX 4090 for those who want to play around with different profile configurations. Anyhow, guys, I have to get back to testing out these GPUs and giving you guys full day one coverage, as well as all the other tests that you like to see. If there's anything peculiar you want to see, do let us know in the comment section below. If it gets enough upvotes, I can see if I can entertain that request for you. Also, I do apologize for not uploading in nearly a week. I've had a lot going on behind the scenes here. I've started testing the 4090s, but I had to get this visa problem sorted where I only had a few days where I would have had to have gone back to Australia. But I'm like, look, I have to get some things sorted here first. Like, for instance, actually getting an ID, and which I don't have here. And this is going to actually tie into the question of the day, but I have been slow because there's been a lot of stuff that I've had to do behind the scenes. I will make a vlog very soon, a BTS vlog, updating you guys with what's been going on. But that aside, we do have the question of the day here, which comes from RM Gaming UK. And they asked, just watching this again a few years later. So they're talking about a video we made about PC flipping a few years later. And they're saying now the PC selling environment is a lot tougher. Would you consider doing an update for the current situation? That is rapidly dropping GPU prices, lower demand because of the economic environment. I've been building PCs for the last few years, and recently was the first time I had to drop a PC's price so low to sell it, I actually made a £50 loss. Next PC I got, great deal, and made a £200 profit, but it seems much harder and PCs taking longer to sell. So to answer this question directly, I recently had a good friend, actually last week, good friend of mine called me up, and he just told me, Brian, I cannot move anything. I've got things up for sale and I'm getting just not even any interest at all. And this is where markets go from good times to bad times. And currently we're in a really bad time. I've been reporting on this in the last year, especially last year. I was warning people this was going to happen. I feel like this scenario was going to happen just based on looking at the central banks and what they were doing, and how also they were then, the trajectory of the money printers was slowing down. And all it took was the money printers to slow down to get bad economic conditions. And that seemed like that prediction was right on the money, no pun intended. But in terms of the situation and helping you out directly, I don't have at the moment a whole lot of boots on the ground experience going through this market, because I came to Japan about 6 months ago and I haven't been flipping much at all. In terms of, I got some stuff on eBay in Australia that my brother's helping me post when that sells. But in terms of me selling gaming PCs, I don't have any ID here, so I can't set up the necessary avenues to sell my PCs and test the market in Japan. But in terms of Australia, I was actually going to go back in about a month and a half before Christmas and literally just get double luggage, so get like 80 kilos, load that up with all the PCs that I've been parts hunting in the last few months, and then just sell all those gaming PCs locally. But when I do that, I'll be able to update you guys and tell you what's going on in Australia. But in terms of used parts in Japan, the market seems very slow. Like, as I go to some of those hard offs, you still see the same things sitting there. I mean, they're a bit of a rip off, but even if I go to some of these PC stores that have really good prices, some of the stuff is just sitting on the shelves there. It's not moving at all. So it is a very slow market, and in these markets, you can only do one thing, and that's turn up the competitive dial and get even more competitive. And that's what's going to happen, not just in PC flipping, but everything else. If we relate that back to the RTX 4090, Nvidia is going to have to compete. People are talking about, oh, okay, Nvidia is just going to rip us off. Well, if they try to, they're going to be met with a consumer that's just not going to buy their product. So they're either going to have to provide really good value or take a haircut, or both. And so it's looking like it's the latter, and that is, it's going to be both. They're going to have to take a haircut and provide better gains, better value than they've ever provided in the past in order to survive. So hopefully that answers that question, and I will catch you guys in another video very soon. But in terms of that question, I will make dedicated videos on the situation when I can. Don't worry about that. I do love the used market. It's part of me, and I love everything about it. And also, I will update you guys in some more finance in the videos as well, because I love talking about this stuff. It's actually really good going forward. Even though I've lost a bit of sleep over it and thinking about where things are going, I think if we can sort of tune our logic radars to where things are heading and be prepared for that, even if it's bad, we can at least weather the storm better than others. Anyhow, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, then be sure to hit that like button for us. And also, if you've stayed this far and you're enjoying that content, then be sure to hit that sub button, ring that bell to get the vids as soon as they drop. And I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out for now. Bye.